My name is Chad Etzel. I'm the host of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm also a trained and certified leadership coach, and my goal is to help you overcome stress and master your time, your money, and your God-inspired future. Now, typically this podcast is about leadership coaching, but I've been encouraged by a number of my friends, a number of the people that I've talked to apply these leadership coaching principles into our personal lives. And specifically with this new series, I'm calling it Catholic, Single, and Flourishing. The goal of the series is to help you as Catholic singles live your God-inspired calling, your vocation today, but also pave a path for the future. So feel free to check out this episode, check out the description in the show notes below. Look for the links for the new podcasts and ways that you can connect with me. And also check out a free resource. It's an ebook that I wrote about helping Catholic singles break the cycle of pressure and inaction. With that, here we go with the episode. Well, welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. It has been a little bit of time since we have last spoken, since I've last posted an episode. That's because I've been doing a ton of research, just getting ready for this season in particular. One of the things that I was just trying to set us up for success is setting up a new YouTube channel. So if you're a traditional listener to the podcast, know that that's another avenue, and you can share with people who may not listen to podcasts and just watch YouTube videos instead. I'm also working on building an Instagram channel, so that way we can have more of a conversation. And I know a lot of people who like to listen to this show are big on Instagram, so that's another avenue for communication. Of course, I'm going to be continuing to do these episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and wherever you get podcasts. Really, I want to encourage you to share these episodes, because if you are a loyal listener to the 8th Day Coaching Podcast, I want to encourage you to share the content, even if it's in a conversation, things you'll learn from this podcast, or actually sharing the podcast with your friends. At this time, there's no monetary cost for you as a listener, but if you share the episode, that's one of the best ways that you can give back. Now, as you can see, I'm making a little pivot here, at least in terms of a podcast series. I don't think I'm changing my business structure or strategy or anything, but I'm going after this particular series. It's called Catholic, Single, and Flourishing. So I'm going to be spending maybe 12 episodes or so really talking about this topic in particular. And I know that there's some listeners who are married. I encourage you to listen to this again to receive the content for yourself and be able to give that to others in conversations if you have single friends, or again, share these episodes with your single friends. This is a very important topic, and I'm going to explain a little bit more of how I've come up with it and why I'm talking about it. But what I've recognized specifically is that it's difficult to be Catholic and single in our world today. I've talked to a number of people, and a lot of things have come up. Really, people talking about wandering at this point in their life, feeling a sense of unfulfillment. We've also kind of uncovered in conversations just a feeling of loneliness, and also I've found one of the most common responses is people just feel pressure in a lot of different ways, not just one, but from a lot of different avenues. And I'm going to talk more about that. So really what I'm trying to do, my goal with this series, is to help Catholic singles flourish today in their single life, but not just be happy and tolerate their single life, but to pave a way and a path forward to their vocation, to their God-inspired calling as they go along in the future. But why this series in particular? Well, one of the things that I realized is that I noticed that there was this gap in Catholic education, Catholic dating education, where being a Culture Project missionary and being a focus missionary, there's a ton of stuff out there for middle school students, for high school students, and that's really what Culture Project focuses on. There's Focus itself is a ministry that's working with college students as well. And that really mentoring, walking with them, discipling them. And there's a lot of time for conversations there. There's conferences specifically for those college students to be able to ask these questions about dating and to get some answers there. I've also noticed that on the other end of things, there's courses, of course, marriage prep for engaged couples. There's courses and there's help, there's ministries dedicated towards those who are in marital relationships and really trying to strive for excellence or heal brokenness in marriage relationships. There's also, I've noticed in some experts, some Catholic relationship experts have been working with pre-engagement couples. So couples who are looking to get more serious, move towards marriage. They're not engaged yet, but there's courses out there designed to help couples really discern if they're called to be married together. But I've noticed that there's this gap, and there's this growing group of people that I call the perpetually single, and the Catholics who are young adult. They're no longer college students. They're not in a relationship, and they're looking for something. They're looking for something to grow in their own personal lives, their own pursuit of virtue, but also really taking steps forward in moving forward to pursuing a relationship. And there just seems to be a gap there. And so what do I mean by perpetual single? I think maybe some of you already have an idea of where this is going, but this could be anything from people who have been in and out of short-term relationships, or relationships that just didn't last, and they're stuck as singles, or people who have gone on dates, a number of dates, but just never got real traction or real results in moving towards a dating relationship that's moving them towards marriage. Or maybe you haven't even been on a date before, or it's been years since you've been on a first date. And this is, you're the audience that I'm really trying to reach, because I know that there's a lot of difficulties, loneliness, pain, wandering in these sorts of things. And there's not really people talking to you as an audience. I know that there's a lot of events out there. There's a lot of things for people who are single and who are Catholic. But what I've noticed is that they're not really addressing the pain points of what we as the perpetually Catholic singles kind of experience. And that's what I want to be speaking to is those particular pain points as it relates to marriage, as it relates to relationships, and so on. I also really want to share too that as I've been doing research for this particular series, I've kind of been advised, hey, your expertise is, financial coaching. So give people, financial coaching, have an angle on that. And I'm certainly going to be sharing those sorts of things. And quite frankly, most of the people who have come to me to hire me as a coach one-on-one have come to me for that personal finance coaching. So that is definitely an offering that I have available. But I've realized, just kind of thinking through what people have shared with me, that's not the pain point. So I want to be addressing the actual pain point that people are struggling with, because no one is really speaking to this audience of the perpetually single. So digging in a little bit more into this perpetually single Catholics, who am I talking to? I'm thinking kind of mid-20s to late 30s, maybe that 25 to 39 range. I know that people outside of that range will probably still be able to take things from this and can be able to identify with that idea of being perpetually single. I am also, with this, I'm kind of assuming that you have some level of faithfulness to your Catholic faith or your Christian faith in your journey. You're united in prayer with the Lord. You're pursuing virtue, but you just haven't gotten that traction in your dating life. And that's a real legitimate thing. I think sometimes we can go to these conferences, we can go to events, or we can talk to people, and it's all you have to do is these sorts of things, and you're going to be perfect. And a lot of it has to do with just, let go and let God mentality, which is important to do. And it's important to trust in God, but it's also important to take steps forward and take action to really move things forward, move our lives forward, and move closer to our God-inspired call, our vocation. So I use that word vocation. It comes from the Latin vocare. It means to call. God has a unique call for us, one of which is maybe marital life, but in the here and now, he's calling us to something now. So that's really what this is all about, is helping you to flourish in your single life, but also prepare a path for the future. Now, you might be wondering, who is Chad to talk about this? Who am I to talk about this? And I certainly think that is a good question. I think that there's a number of things that I can share from my own perspective. I am not perfect myself. I'm 32. I'm single. So I understand I have some limitations here, but I also am experiencing this. And I think that's the number one value that I provide to you is I'm working through this. I'm struggling through this. I'm feeling these challenges versus if I go to my married friends, some of them maybe got married when they were in college and it was the first person that they ever seriously dated or even went on a date with before, there's not much, at least from their personal experience, that they can speak into. Whereas I think that's my unique value, is I can offer at least observations and insight from my own life. I'm going to share a little bit more of my story. There's an episode on the hero's journey. I think it's episode 2. And then I also share a little bit more of my faith journey and my journey into coaching there. I'll probably create an episode where I go a little bit more into insights, things that I've learned on my own dating journey, my own Catholic single life journey. I also want to tell you too, this is years of ministry. I spent years of ministry working for Culture Project, working for Focus, speaking to high school students, college students. I've been very involved in young adult ministry in where I live here in Denver. So I understand, at least in observing, working with people, how relationships work, and just how have I ministered to relationships over the years. In addition, I'm a trained and certified coach. I've spent over 160 hours in training, and then I have another over 100 hours in terms of actually practically coaching people. Mostly what I do right now, I have a full-time job in Focus where I'm doing leadership coaching. A lot of what I do is talk about time management and work-life integration in those areas. Of course, very translatable to this life of being single, and how do we pick and choose what we do with our time. And what I'm really trying to do I'll also mention too, I mentioned earlier about personal finance coaching. I do a lot of personal finance coaching on the side, so I have a lot of experience in that. But what I want to do is take these leadership principles, things I've learned in coaching, things that I've learned in leadership coaching, and apply them to our personal lives. Because there is a lot of crossover here. There's a lot of very important things that we can learn from the business world and apply them into our personal lives. I don't want to get too mechanical here. Every person has a unique situation, but I want to be able to provide just whatever insight and observations that I've learned that you might be able to carry forward in your own life as well. In addition, as I prepared, I've done some research groups for this particular thing. I've asked groups of men, groups of women, groups of men and women together, different questions ranging from what are Catholic singles feeling in terms of their attitude towards their vocation? What are they feeling in terms of their attitude towards marriage? What do you think are some of those pain points? What do you think are some of the solutions? So I've done my research as I've kind of prepared for this podcast series. So I'm getting outside of my own head, and I'm able to really provide something that is a conversation where I think a lot of times men talk to men, women talk to women. There's an ability to kind of cross those two paths, and just for me to share from that research as well. I also want to mention, as I'm introducing this podcast, that this isn't something that is simply for people who are discerning marriage or dating or wanting to date. I want to broaden this out to people who want to live a good, happy, healthy, single life. Because even if somebody has a desire to be married, one of the things that I found just common amongst singles who want to be married or don't want to be married now, or maybe thinking about it in the future, there's that common goal of maybe being married. But the second goal is underneath everything, no matter where you're coming from, is I want to be enjoying the experience. I want to be enjoying the journey today. So even if somebody's coming to me for Catholic singles coaching, they want to experience that flourishing today. So that's really what this podcast is all about. All right, getting into our topic today, as I have teased with the title, the topic is the determining factor in you living your vocation. So what is that determining factor? Well, one of the things that I asked in these research groups is, why are Catholic singles not married? Why are Catholic singles not married? And what was amazing is I got dozens and dozens of answers. There's so many answers that people threw out there. Anything from, I live in a small town in, say, the Midwest, and I know all the men here. Okay. Others might say, hey, there's too few options, which was funny because I've also heard the opposite, which is there's too many options. There's another one where I'm an introvert and I struggle with confidence. That's not uncommon for people to really experience. And then Lack of holy men. That was a very common one that came up. There's another here. Women my age are too picky. And of course, this is thrown out. Oftentimes it's more of a joke, but I think there's a reality to it. And, I just don't have enough money to be able to support a family or to get on more dating apps or whatever it is. And I want to say with all of these are all genuine realities. But each of these are not the determining factor. Each of these are contributing factors, but they're not the determining factor. Let's just take a look at the list here. I live in a small town in the Midwest and know all the men here. Okay. Yeah, that is a genuine reality. But what are you going to do with that reality? There's a possibility of moving or getting on a dating app where you really can increase your radius to 1,000 miles or what have you. There's always something you could do with that. It might be uncomfortable. It might be different. It might change things. But that's the thing is it's not the determining factor. There are too few options. Again, there's the converse where people bring up there's just too many options. Well, how do you shrink your options or how do you expand your options? I'm an introvert and I struggle with confidence. This comes from a fixed mindset. We talk about fixed mindset. We talk about growth mindset. One of the most powerful things we can have in our lives is this idea that we can grow. If I'm an introvert, okay, yeah, I might have this natural tendency to this, but I can learn the skills to become much more of a people person. And it may not be my natural tendency, but I can learn how to relate to people, how to have a better conversation, entering into that growth mindset. Lack of holy men. How many men do you need? Okay, I'm joking, of course, but obviously the answer is just one. There is a legitimacy. There's more women than there are men typically practicing the Catholic faith, 100%. And I'd say for all churches, at least what I've observed, even within the Protestant world. But at the same time, there's certain events here I go in Denver where the ratio is 2-to-1 men to women. And it's actually just stunning compared to what is typically the narrative of there's a lot more women than men who are active. So it's kind of figuring out how do I enter into those areas. Anyway, we can continue to go on and on and on with all these different objections. These are contributing factors, but they're not the determining factor. So what is the determining factor? Well, the determining factor is actually you. It's you in the decisions that you make, in the actions that you take. We live in this world where there's circumstances that happen all around us. There's situations that we are put in, but we ultimately have a decision on what do we do with those circumstances. Again, going back to those contributing factors that I mentioned earlier is the idea of, well, okay, what do you do with the contributing factor? What do you do with that? So that's really what I'm trying to do here in helping you is move beyond what are those contributing factors, move towards determining factors, the determining factor, which is you. Now, before I am accused of self-reliance and leaving God out of it, I do want to say that specifically God, he is calling you to continue to grow. And sometimes that growth is uncomfortable. He's calling us to grow in our relationship with him in prayer, in hearing his voice. But he's also calling us to take action. And as I mentioned, virtue I like to compare, it's kind of like a spiritual muscle, where if you go to the gym and you're working on your physical body, you got to lift weights. It's going to be uncomfortable. That is a reality of our growth in terms of our physical body. But there's also the spiritual growth or spiritual muscle. It is uncomfortable to grow in the virtue of courage and being able to approach somebody at a young adult event and introduce yourself and engage in a conversation. That's difficult. And this virtue doesn't just go away once you have a spouse or once you've really achieved your purpose or found what it is that God is calling you to at this point in your life. It's a constant growth that I know married couples will attest to. Virtue doesn't stop once you get to the marriage altar. This is something that as a single person, we have the opportunity to grow to. And I think God is really challenging us in the day-to-day things that we face. It isn't just about prayer. It's about really taking that step forward, hearing God's call and taking those steps forward. I'm reminded a little bit of this sort of mentality that in one of the conversations I had a conversation with a woman. She was mid-30s, and I was asking her that question about single life and why do you think Catholic women are single? Why do you think Catholic men are single? And one of the things that she related it to was herself. She said, I have been doing mission work. I have been pursuing God's will as I'm a teacher now in the classroom. And I just haven't met a man that I wanted to marry. And she was being honest with that. And she was really taking ownership over her situation. And I think that's key insight for us is, what are we doing to pursue God's will? And in the meantime, how are we open to meet somebody new that along the way? And it reminded me a little bit too. I've been asking this question about my own life and the choices that I've made and asking, why am I single? And I really do think, similar to what she was saying, I've made choices in my life. I made choices in my life that have led me to today. I really own that. And there's several instances, maybe I was dating, where things might have worked out, or I had asked somebody out, or I had made a different decision in terms of a dating situation. But so for better or for worse, I've made these certain decisions and it's led me to where I am today. But I take comfort in really staying rooted in prayer, in pursuing God's call. I know that when I was 23 and joined the Culture Project, spent 5 years with them, I knew that might be a rough road where I'm moving every single year, or on a travel team. It would create some difficulties in terms of creating a stable relationship. Or joining Focus when I was 28 years old. Same thing. There's a lot of instability. There's a lot of different things. I was over the stretch of a 10-year period. I hadn't lived in one place more than 2 years. So there's been a lot of instability up into my life, and those decisions have factored into where I am today. I think I just got to own those sorts of things, but take comfort that, hey, look, this is what God's calling me to. And, whatever God's calling me to, wherever he's leading me, that's what I'm going to pursue. But I'm also not going to shrink away from trying to take action in my dating life. One thing that I do want to talk about, and this was something that just came up in dating, in talking about those research conversations I had on dating. I want to invite you to avoid judging your situation as bad, being a single. Hey, I'm searching for purpose in my single life, and I just haven't found it, and so that's bad. No, don't do that. Avoid judging your situation and avoid comparing yourself to others. There's so much pressure. One of the things that came up in these dating groups is this idea of pressure. There's so much pressure around us. That was the number one emotion that people cited. That amazed me, and it's coming from all these different directions. One of which is coming from the world. I think from a young age, maybe we're watching Disney movies, and I think back to like all the Disney movies, and everything was either centered around a love story, or love story was very prevalent to this idea of happily ever after. Even 101 Dalmatians, there's a love story in there, a couple love stories really. And there's dogs, and they're dogs, but whatever. There's this concept of happily ever after, and I think we're sold this over and over from media, social media, and so on. So that's one of the difficulties that we're facing. And then in addition to that, we have our family and friends who, while well-intentioned and very, very I'm sure that they mean well, might come across sometimes as like, hey, why don't you get along with your life? I'm reminded I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He's not necessarily looking to get married, but he says that it's kind of a monthly occurrence that people keep asking him, hey, when are you going to get married? Are you going to get married soon? So we do have that pressure from those sources as well. In addition to that, there is, in the Catholic world, a lot of our friends, we see them getting married very soon after college, and we might be internally kind of pained by the fact that we see that, we want that, and it's not happening for us. We feel that pressure from that, or we're being told within maybe a conference or a talk or a podcast, hey, you got to get on with your life and marry young and so on. And it just hasn't materialized for us, but we still feel that pressure. In addition, I think there's also pressure that we have internally that comes from the stories we tell ourselves. And I think especially for women, when it comes to biology, many of the women in these research groups and conversations that I've had, they talk about motherhood and how that is very connected to their perceived identity, and how becoming a mother, there's a sort of achieving your purpose there that they really feel called to, but it just hasn't happened to them. And there's true legitimate pain to that. I think for men, it may be less connected to biology because we don't have such the same biological clock. But I think for us, when it comes to identity, having a relationship a lot of times means validation for us. It means we have accomplished something, we've achieved something. And that really strikes at the core of who we are, especially if we're lacking in this area as men. And then, of course, there's the culture at large, where I think the culture in social media, in politics, in the news has really told us the same thing over and over, is that life just happens to you. You don't have ownership over your life other than every maybe 2 to 4 years when you get a chance to vote. But that, in funny thing, I've been kind of thinking about this with the political election recently, is both political parties essentially say similar things, even though they're saying different things. They have the same message, which is you have problems in the world, and your problems are going to be solved by voting us into office. Both parties have that similar message there. But this constant message over and over and over again, where you don't have control over your life, vote us in because that's the only control over, it takes a toll on us, and it creates a story that will bleed into other areas of our life if we are not careful. So I want to go back to this whole point here. There's all these pressures, there's all these influences, but all these, while they might be legitimate contributing factors into how we feel and how they affect how we behave, they are not the determining factor, because the determining factor is you and the decisions that you make. Life changes when we truly take ownership over our lives and over our actions. Life changes when we take ownership over our lives and our actions. And if you think about it, yes, there is inflation. Yes, gas prices are going up and constantly are higher than they were several years ago. And yes, that does impact us. But what really impacts us most is the decisions that we make on how much we buy with our groceries, what we buy with our groceries, how much we drive with our gas, with our vehicles, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to, just our day-to-day choices, that's the ultimate impact on whether we're winning on the financial level. That's just an example there. But when it comes to dating, okay, if you see that there's no eligibles, okay, there might be a reality there in your world, but what do you do with that reality? Life changes when we take ownership over our lives and our actions. And that's really what I want to get across with this in the podcast here. The story that comes to my mind, and it's very interesting. I think this may be a little bit easier for men to receive than women to receive. I just remember specifically, I was talking to a young woman, mid-20s, and I was talking about, she was talking about her vocation and discerning her vocation. And I just asked, how can you further discern your vocation? And she said, it's a very clear religious life. I can go tour and check out some convents, check out those convents. And I said, well, what about dating and marriage? And she said, well, when it comes to taking action, I don't really know what I can do. I mean, I'm not going to ask any guys out. And I had to resist saying this to her, but immediately had about 10 things come to mind of things that she could do without actually asking guys out that could further her situation as she discerned if she was, being called in the direction of marriage. But really, it was just, there's actions, and I think especially, again, going back to, this is probably easier for men to receive than women to receive. I think women have been told over and over, the man's got to be the initiator, and the man's got to make the first move. And to a certain extent, I would agree with that. But that doesn't mean women need to be completely passive here. So I'm not going to get too far into action steps that you can take, at least in this podcast, just because this one's going a lot longer than what I had planned for originally. But we're going to be talking about more of those specific action steps in the future. I want to get into also with this of, if I throw out action steps and I tell you to do something, that may not resonate with you. That's what we call advice giving, which sometimes advice works, sometimes advice is helpful, but sometimes it actually doesn't go deep enough. It doesn't address your particular situation. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between advice and coaching, and what I've trained in is coaching. And advice oftentimes doesn't get to the heart of the matter. It is superficial. It's thrown out there as, hey, you should do this. And for example, hey, have you tried this app, this dating app, or you should just go out and do those things that you're interested in, and maybe you'll meet somebody there. But if you've been doing the whole app thing for 18 months or 2 years, or you've been going to these events over and over and over again, it's not getting to the heart of the matter because you're already doing some of those things. So really again, going back to these research groups, what I found is asking that question, why are Catholics single? You get dozens and dozens of answers. What I found is that each person has a unique need or has a unique answer that needs to be tailored to their particular situation, their particular needs, which is why coaching, as opposed to advice giving, is really what is the most impactful thing that's going to actually move you forward. Because what coaching is, what we're trained as coaches is to listen deeply to what are the challenges, what are the problems, what are the struggles that you are experiencing. What are those roadblocks? What are those obstacles? We help you recognize what those obstacles are for yourself. A lot of times those obstacles are internal. They're limiting thoughts, limiting beliefs. And we help you release those. We help you overcome those obstacles by asking you empowering questions to not only release those thoughts, but also empower you to take steps forward, to take action steps forward. So like that woman I was sharing with you a little bit earlier, that thought of, I don't think I can do anything. That's a limiting belief that's actually holding her back from those 10 things that were coming to my mind as to things that she could have done to take steps forward. So really, that's what coaching is. It's more of a personalized approach to help you to be more flourishing in your single life now, but also pave a path for your vocation, for your God-inspired calling as you go forward. I'm going to leave okay, so just consider this an invitation for me to be your coach in whatever way you feel helpful. I'm going to leave contact information for me in the show notes so you can reach out to me. If you want to schedule, say, a discovery call or something, I'm available for that. Some of the things that I offer personally are whether it's one-on-one coaching or group coaching. There's different situations. One-on-one is deeply personalized to you. Group coaching, you can bring a group of friends together and it lowers the cost for the entire group, or individually. It lowers the cost for what people pay. I'm also looking to offer a workshop or two during this podcast series so that you can have some more content and ask questions and see how this applies to you. But really, and also I want to provide certain resources for you to overcome inaction. But whatever it is, I want to help you, whether you're looking to be married and move towards marriage, or whether you're really just looking for purpose and direction in your single life. I want to help you overcome those obstacles and take steps forward. So with that, coming up on the podcast, I'm actually going to have Dr. Greg Bottaro coming up. He's going to be helping me in just talking about being single around the holidays. Obviously, the holidays can be a time of loneliness and longing, especially as we're maybe single and spending time around our family of origin and seeing on social media all of our friends with their family photos and all that. So really navigating the holidays as a single person and really embracing our time as single people and what opportunities are there for us. We're also going to be talking about his mentorship program. So similar to me, as I am a coach and I can provide coaching, he's rolled out a mentorship program, which is different than therapy, in really helping people take action and take steps forward in recognizing who they are in Christ, who their identity is in Christ. Coming up on the podcast, I'm also going to have Dr. Edward Sri of Focus come on. He's authored, dozens of books, and it's awesome to have him coming on the show and talking about virtue in the single life. And Arlene Spenceley, she's going to come on the show. I had a conversation with her the other day. Really looking forward to recording an episode with her. She's very active in Catholic single life, Catholic dating life, has a lot of wisdom there. Also, as I said before, now have a YouTube channel. So if you want to listen to me on YouTube, watch me on YouTube, see my face and me actually speaking into the camera. It's unedited. So of course, I'm just doing the best that I can on this, but I am absolutely confident that I can deliver and just want to reach more people, which is why I'm doing this on YouTube as well. And again, Apple Podcasts, I want to encourage you to leave a 5-star rating if you're receiving something from this and you're receiving good content from this. And in addition to that, leave a comment because it really helps with the promotion of the podcast. It also, maybe answer this question. I want to throw this question as we wrap up here. With this insight of knowing that you are the determining factor, how can you take action steps forward in living your vocation? So allow yourself to engage there, to comment, see how this is impacting you there, but also on Instagram. I do want to hear from you and want to connect with you. And if you want to reach out to me in any of these channels, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to be able to converse with you and help you with your unique situation. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening to what this series is all about. And I'm really hopeful that this is going to help you take steps forward in your own personal life, whether it's dating or whether it's your Catholic single life. So with that, wrapping up, I just want to say, as always, live inspired, live God inspired. Thank you for watching this episode of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe on this YouTube channel, and check the description down below for any free offerings that I have, like my ebook on breaking the cycle of pressure in inaction for Catholic singles. Also, feel free to check out our other offerings at 8thdaycoaching.com.